president to get Israel to send U.S. Skyhawks to Indonesia to enable Indonesia to complete
Luxembourg.
what turned out to be near genocide, killing maybe a quarter of the population or something. In the Middle East, Carter just won the Nobel Prize. His great achievement was the Camp David agreements. The Camp David agreements are presented as
So I think you can go d5 here.
Triumph for the United States. In fact,
Or can you take on e4?
Catastrophe.
Can you take on e4? Pawn takes.
The United States and
Queen
Israel
h4 check.
accepted finally Egypt's 1971 offer, which they had then U.S. had rejected at the time, except that now it was worse from the U.S. Israeli point of view because
if he goes king d2, he loses the knight.
In order to get Israel to accept.
Let's see, what's the other option? I know there's another option.
After a major war and atrocities
right?
and so on.
Or can he only go king e2? Because if he goes king e2,
yeah.
He might do that. He might go king e2, queen takes.
50% of total
check.
aid worldwide.
Bishop e3.
Israel used it at once in exactly the way they said they were going to do, as
and
then person knew, as an opportunity to attack their northern neighbor, first in 1978, then in 1982.
Yeah, maybe knight to e5.
And increase integration of the occupied territories. And that's for starters. We can continue.
c5, stopping queen d3.
I don't think we have to talk about that one either. I mean,
pretty much all the modern powers have done genocide and whatnot, China and Russia too. That delayed reaction is copium.
Because, I can't remember if
all modern powers have contributed to violence
if it's good
around
or not.
the globe.
If you should just go d5.
Compare it to the hegemonic superpower is another way of Americans that engage in some level of like liberal cope to be like, well, everybody does it, right? And it's like not to the same level or severity. Nothing comes close to it. If anything, you can talk about like local powers doing mini genocides in their own backyards.
I mean, that's really bad, right?
Always that comes from the that almost always comes from America allowing it to happen, or sometimes directly facilitating it.
I guess G3 will be playable because if
like,
you take on G3,
like
you
people always
point
to like the Hungarian, the Hungarian USSR actions, right, in Hungary, and it's like what you're describing there is marginal in comparison to what America did all around the world. Like, it's just. I don't know. It's frustrating.
Maybe you just go queen a5.
Check. We turn around and you know, run the whole hypothetical argument of like, well, what if hypothetically Russia or China was the global hegemonic power?
Oh.
Then they would do the same thing, and it's like, yeah, but that's hypothetical. Like you're looking at. You're looking at the hypothetical possible violence that other world powers would genuinely engage in.
Should we go back?
By pointing to, you know, the need that America has to keep doing what it's doing currently in order to stop this hypothetical genocide in the future. Okay?
Play a little solid.
Very frustrating.
Trade some pieces, maybe.
And it's unfortunately a very commonplace. It's a very commonplace argument, specifically for Israel. Crazy Chomsky didn't mention that Carter's action in the Middle East, i.e., funneling weapons of the Mujahideen and allowing CIA to prop up and promote Islamist fundamentalists. By the way, I think he didn't because it hadn't come out yet. I don't know when this interview was done, but I think Brzezinski openly admitted that in. On a French newspaper in like 1997 or maybe later. I don't know. If this interview is in the 2000s, maybe
play
he
d5.
could have brought it up. But I'm pretty sure like Zbigniew Brzezinski, Mika Brzezinski's father, didn't reveal that bit before like. It was before 2001, before 9/11 happened, but it was like close to 9/11 happening, where he was flexing about how
Just
they are
Castro.
the ones that brought Russia into Afghanistan, with the hopes that Afghanistan would turn to Russia's Vietnam by arming the Mujahideen.
I'll go D5.
Is a great leap forward not as bad, brother? That is an incredible that is an incredible thing to compare. You understand that? Like, you're looking at no one, and I mean, at least as far as I know, in the history of the planet, looks to the Great Depression and points to it as though it's like a phenomena that was brought about. Like, we don't, even if on the most communist, most leftist circles, you look at like the mass amounts of wealth consolidation, it's still understood as like something that happened, like famines that occurred, as partially a natural mechanism of the economy operating. Okay.
So we got 95.
The
And we
problem
go knight D5.
is the way we look at famines under communist rule is directly a byproduct of deliberate and systematic murders, rather than a negative consequence of like oftentimes well-intentioned policy failures that legitimately create massive crises, sometimes not so well-intentioned. There's a difference between the systematized machine of death and destruction and ethnic cleansing within the Holocaust, or the systematized machine of the extraction of labor through violent means in the form of chattel slavery, or what the Belgians did in the Congo, and like countries trying to move away and collectivize within their own means after being victim to colonial violence and not being able to industrialize adequately. To flatten all of that, and reduce it to this was conducted, this was done specifically for violence, for the sake of violence purposes, to look at it from a black and white framework is ridiculous. And it's a way to engage in copium, like countries doing it to themselves for one reason or another is still going to be different than America doing it to every country on the planet. It can, right? So I think some people deliberately bring me to this conversation so they can like say, "Oh, you're immoral," or "Your perspective is broken." Look, it's hypocritical. It's hypocrisy. There is no such hypocrisy, and I will always duke it out on those terms if necessary. But of course, yes. I mean, these are abject failures. The USSR had its own version as well. I understand and can contextualize why it happened. I can describe why it happened. However, having said that, yes, of course, it's bad. Famine is bad across the board. It is a abject failure, right? Yes, millions of death, not good. Well, not millions, but still. The interview was from 2003, and the Brzezinski interview was from 1998. Chomsky just straight up failed to mention it. Yeah, big L for Chomsky.
Reagan is the first president to have been condemned by the International Court of Justice for what they called the unlawful use of force, meaning international terrorism in the war against Nicaragua.
So
again, that's just for starters. They also, the Security Council endorsed it in 2 resolutions, both of which were vetoed by the United States.
Bush won.
Well, we can begin with the invasion of Panama. The invasion of Panama, which, according to the Panamanians, killed about 3,000 people, since it's never in.
China and Russia have also done major imperialism. That was pretty much the whole point of the Cold War, not some ideological battle. China's actions.
So I should do this.
Check.
In every part of the globe was directly trying to either squash what it considered to be a rebellion or help ideologically aligned governments. It was a major misstep, Afghanistan being the gravest example of such. Okay? But there's a difference between saying,
964 is
you
correct.
have weapons of war, we're coming, and we're
Check.
going to take all of your oil, for example, and the Afghan communist government being like, please come help us purge the Muslims because they're going crazy because we keep purging the Muslims personally. Even after the USSR is like, hey, maybe you should dial it back on the religious repression a little bit. People are getting really fucking violent. And then inevitably going in to the communist Afghan government, to the communist Afghan government and you know, helping by then also, I think they were the ones who executed the leadership, right? There's a difference between that and being like, oh, we're just going to go in because we are at odds with the regional operation. We are at odds with whoever is running the country. And with the express purpose of like going
Not a bad
in
game, not a
and
bad game, baby.
securing material
I'll take it.
wealth, securing the natural wealth, for example. And that is the difference between these actions. Did you mean to say
GG.
China? No, I'm talking about Afghanistan. I'm talking about Russia's